Hi y'all.
Hi, y'all.
Hey, today is December 13th. About 10 days ago, there was an important abortion law that went before the Supreme Court. So we thought we'd get together and discuss it. Have you heard much about it or you need me to fill you in?
I would really appreciate you filling me in. I've been a little busy with Christmas stuff this week.
Oh, yeah, you're always the busy bee. The last 2 weeks we've started by talking about where have you been? You've been so busy. I'm the one without a life, so I can read on the internet more. Um, so it's a law, it's a Mississippi law to ban abortions after 15 weeks, except in cases of like health like life threatening to the mother or severe fetal abnormalities. So if it's like literally a case of life and death for the mother or the fetus, you can allow it. Anything else after 15 weeks, no. Um, so Roe v. Wade has always been 24 weeks, I think, because the
I think that
idea,
sounds right.
yeah, it's 24. Because the idea is fetal liability. The idea is, yes, abortion should be legal unless the fetus is then would be viable if born. If it could survive on its own,
Hmm.
then it's considered its own person who receives protections from the state. So the new abortion laws, this one coming out of Mississippi, the 6-week one coming out of Texas, what they want to do is move that timeline way back from the 24 weeks. Yeah, because the central argument of the pro-life movement is that personhood begins at conception, um, versus the Roe v. Wade argument, personhood begins at is this fetus, is this baby, is this little guy, whatever, could it live on its own? Yeah, well, then it's a person.
Right.
Oh, I want to say two things. I think we should discuss, I think we should discuss this maybe in there's two different ways to discuss this, and I don't think we're qualified to do one, which is there's the constitutionality arguments and the legal arguments. And what legal argument are they making in front of the Supreme Court? What legal arguments were made in Roe v. Wade? And I just don't think that you and I have that expertise. I mean, no, neither of us is even acquainted with the law, let alone trained as lawyers. So I know a little bit about some of the arguments and the way they're made, and they're interesting. But the way I think you and I should talk about it here on Sweet Tea, which like the whole idea of regular women should just talk about what they think and what they experience, is how arguments are made in the general public between different groups of people, between pro-lifers, between hardcore pro-choice, between people who maybe feel like, well, there should be abortion, but with these certain limitations, or there should be bans with certain exceptions. I think the different ways people think about it is interesting. And I also think you and I probably both kind of went on a thought journey in our lives, because I know we were both raised by conservatives, raised in Christian churches and Christian households. So it's not like we were raised pro-choice, from the time of
Right.
our own adolescence. And so I thought maybe we could talk about some of the arguments that we found convincing to change our minds from being pro-life to pro-choice. So you see what I'm saying about the two different, like maybe we shouldn't talk so much about constitutional law. Let's just talk about, you know, what people are arguing when they're trying to decide if they're pro-life or pro-choice. You know what I'm saying?
Right. What the normies on the ground are talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Because so here's something that I kind of struggle with. At the end of the day, I am not confident that abortion is constitutionally protected. like I said, I'm not an expert in constitutional law, but it's just not as obvious as you have things that are so explicitly addressed, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, like it is stated out that way.
Right.
Whereas, like, there's no way that women's healthcare is even on the founding fathers' radar screen. You know what I'm saying? Those people,
Right.
those people being women of the 18th century, they were not even people to them. So I don't know that it is constitutionally protected.
Well, and it doesn't feel like it these days because it's always being attacked.
Yeah, I think that's why it's so vulnerable to attack, is it's not got such a solid foundation in law. So yeah, the arguments people use to decide their own opinions, which usually decides like how you're going to vote, how you're going to try to persuade others, friends and neighbors. What I find most persuasive is you cannot make a secular argument against it, against abortion. You can only make a religious argument. Like if you're going to argue life begins the moment of conception, that's a religious argument.
Yeah, that's not that's not written down as a fact anywhere.
Yeah, that's
So
not
it get in
scientific. Yeah.
it gets into the feelings and religious and yeah.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I could never find, I remember when gay marriage was illegal and hotly debated, and finding a like a handout flyer kind of thing on my car one time in a parking lot. You know, they put the flyers on your windshield, and it was all the arguments against gay marriage. And I read through the like 8, 10 arguments, whatever. And I was just so struck by the fact that they were all religious. You could not make a secular argument against gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to be against it except for different religious reasons. And then I
Right.
feel the same about abortion, that I can't find a secular religious argument to be against it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever met anybody who wasn't religious who supported like, just anti-abortion laws in any way.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
always religious in some form.
And people will talk about, oh well, it's it's a men's rights issue, or it's just misogyny, people hate women, people want to control women. But yeah, I never meet someone like that. Yeah, I never meet a secular misogynist who's like anti-abortion just because he wants to control women. So I think you're
Right.
right. I think it's like only religious. Um yeah, so that's why I think it should be considered a health procedure like any other. Um and then you kind of see that. So if you're going to argue life begins at conception, then we actually have a fundamental unanswered question about in vitro fertilization, because they fertilize and warehouse like tons and tons of zygotes.
Mm-hmm.
Like a couple will get, I don't know, 14 fertilized eggs, right? And then they'll just implant like 3 at a time to see if any of them take. And then one of them takes and they carry to full term. And now they have, I'm just like making up these numbers because I think it's like about a dozen. Do you know more about this than me? Like,
I don't know the numbers, but but the general idea is there.
yeah, it's like
You get a
you
bunch
get a
and then you
bunch.
take a few to start out with to see how it goes.
Yeah. And then when you have your baby and you decide, okay, we're not going to do this again, let's say you have 10 fertilized embryos left. Well, if they are people, I mean, why aren't why aren't conservatives, why aren't religious people trying to persecute couples who've done in vitro fertilization and then have their unused embryos destroyed?
That's a good point. I don't know that I've ever thought about that, but yeah, that is a really good point. Because again, it's not a fact that it begins at conception. That's just not
Yeah.
a fact.
It's not a fact. And I think it's also not intuitive. I think that's why religious people don't go off on that issue, is because at some level they know that's not a person. They know that just a fertilized egg in a test tube in storage is not a person.
Right.
And I don't know why they kind of can't make the extra intuitive step of a fertilized egg inside a woman is not a person yet either.
Well, I know what I experienced growing up in a super, super Southern Baptist home
Mhm.
as a kid. Um, yeah, we're talking like, hellfire and brimstone kind of churches. The
Yeah.
preacher's always yelling and pounding on the Bible. It's all about emotion,
Mm,
emotions all the time. And so they would show us like on like a big screen or posters or something, and it would look like an actual like dead baby.
yeah.
And there was this whole like, it's murdered babies. You don't want dead babies. You don't want them to be able to murder babies. And it was just like, hitting on people's emotions because nobody wants to be like, oh yeah, I support dead babies. No, you don't. Nobody does.
Yeah.
Nobody's
Nobody
okay with
supports
that.
dead babies. It's true.
And so like they just kind of, just went with that angle. Like we know that nobody in their right mind is going to be like, yeah, we need dead babies. We don't. We have That's not a good thing at all. Everybody knows that. Like you'd be stupid to think otherwise. So
Yeah.
they went on this whole thing and they would have like images not of what the embryo actually looks like. We were talking about they would have like pictures of like what looked like a fully formed child,
Yeah.
and it was just like, well, of course you're gonna have some feelings about that. But if you actually know the science behind it and know like what the embryo actually resembles, like, no, it changes the whole thing, because you can't really rely on your emotions when you're looking at like what the baby looks like, you know,
Yeah.
at like 6 weeks. It does not look like a fully
Right.
formed child. It's not, because it's not a fully formed child.
Yeah. I think they get I suddenly wondered like where do they get these images? I guess medical textbooks. But I
Probably.
think they take images of late term abortions, which
Right.
late term abortions do exist, because this is what I think a lot of religious people don't stop and realize about late term abortions. The thing about a very late term abortion is in the vast majority of cases, that that child really is wanted. It's that it has some severe developmental chromosomal disorder, um, that the parents decide the most humane thing to do would be to terminate before birth because there are, uh, you know, um, what is the word for that? I'm gonna go with chromosomal. That's not the word I want, but the the word for oh my gosh, I don't know. The word
Yeah,
for like birth
I know
defects,
what
but
you
you know what I'm
mean.
saying? But there,
Yeah.
you know how there are disorders that the doctor tells you, okay, well, the baby will be born, it will suffer excruciating pain for a few hours and then die. And in an attempt to save that child from that pain, the parents make for themselves the very painful decision that the more humane option is late term abortion. And I know I've definitely read mothers who have made that choice and felt like that was their like really felt like that choice and that act was their one chance to parent the child, but like
Right.
to oh, I'm getting emotional. But their one chance to like what is it like one of your primary goals to be a parent is to protect your child from pain, from suffering, from distress, from danger, right? So that was her one chance to protect her child from severe pain and to give the child a peaceful end. And
Right.
so really felt that it was an act of parenthood. And so I think when people don't stop and consider the reasons that most very late term abortions occur, they really lose that sense of compassion for the really difficult, painful position those mothers and those parents are in.
Right. Yeah, because from what I understand, it's like that's not the norm. That's
Right.
not when women are going to get an abortion, like that they're going to want to get it, earlier on, once they realize that they're pregnant and, maybe they can't provide or, it's the woman's choice, really. It doesn't matter what her reason is.
Right. Yeah. So let's get back to, because I feel like the argument I just made was also a very emotional argument, and I feel like it was I don't want to say religious, but it was kind of philosophical in the idea of, well, in the case of fetal abnormality and parents making humane choices,
In
um
those kind of situations, I
yeah,
feel like they just get lost because if you are convinced that, that life begins at conception and you are actually murdering a child if you have to have an abortion at any point, then you just kind of lose, like, like you were saying, like those parents are put in a very difficult position, like once you're at like 8 or 9 months, you're planning for this child to be in your life.
mhm,
You're probably preparing your home for this child, rearranging your whole life so you can be a
mhm.
parent. And then you are faced with like the most heartbreaking situation ever. Like, what do you do? Do you give birth, or do you make this decision, like you said, to protect the child and do what's better for them? And it's like those kind of situations, like they're never considered. And it's like those are the ones that are happening at these late term. That's the situation.
Yeah,
It's
that's the vast
not
majority of the late term. Yeah, and I don't know why. Well, I guess the reason they're not talked about in the religious communities is because it does undermine their overall argument.
right.
Um, but I do think that argument for compassion for parents with a late term unviable pregnancy, I think that would reach a lot of religious people, but I just think it's not usually presented to them. They haven't. It's also one of those situations that unless you or a family member has gone through it, you don't. I don't know. You don't really think about it. I didn't really think about it until I was well into adulthood and somebody brought it up. I think it was 30 the first time anyone brought it up to me, and I was like, oh wow, that's like a really good point about, yeah, late term abortions usually happen because there is something very severely wrong.
Right.
Um, oh, but I
But
wanted
in
to say a minute ago, like, I want to get back to making a secular point though. So I feel like that's a good point about compassion and everything. I think that would really resonate with a lot of people who lean more toward the pro-life side. Um, but I want to go back to making a secular point about viability. Um, and that's no one can legally force anyone else to serve as their life support machine. Like you, if you needed um, a kidney and you had super rare, I don't know how they match kidneys, combination of blood type and whatever, this, that, and the other. It was super rare. And I matched, and I was the only person who matched. You would die if I didn't give you my kidney. You cannot legally force me to give you a kidney.
Right. You're
That
not
is,
responsible for
yeah,
my failing kidneys. Right.
no one is required by law to donate any part of their body to keep another person alive.
Except for women.
Yeah. So even if you want to argue, oh, a late term, it's a baby the whole time and forget viability, you have to keep it alive. No, 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 no. Women are not obligated to be anyone's life support system, whether that person is 50 years old or 5 weeks old. So, like, even if a religious person wants to make the argument, oh, but life begins at conception, a 2 week old fetus is a baby. If that is a citizen of the United States, let's say a 2 week old fetus is a citizen of the United States, you can still make the secular argument. It doesn't matter. I am not obligated to serve as a life support system for any citizen of the United States.
Right.
So you still don't, it still doesn't work as a secular argument.
And I think like just outside of like medical situations, like you said, like we're not responsible to be life support for anybody.
True.
So like even if there's no medical situation, nothing,
Yeah. Even if it's just like
you're
financial
still
support, emotional support.
right.
Yeah.
You're still asking a woman to, change her entire life. And let's not even get started on the whole like, what if the woman was raped?
Oh,
What if it's
we should
incest?
address that. We should
I
address
mean,
it. But yeah,
there's
you finish this point first. Yeah.
there's so many other situations that it's like, how are you going to expect this woman or even young girl to
Yes.
to change her entire life to to support this child, this child that she's not ready for? I mean, even I don't know, there's just too many variables, and it's like you're expecting a woman to be a life support
Mm-hmm.
for another being, and then that's not expected of anybody else except
Yeah,
for
because it's not even
others.
expected of men. People are like, oh, but men pay child support. Yeah. I mean, okay, yeah, some are good. Sure, not all men. But come on, think about like child support law, child family courts. Yeah, if you drag a man through the ringer long enough, and then even then he might not pay, and you have to like get the cops to track him down. Like it's very, very hard. Our society makes it very hard to hold men accountable for child support. So yeah, don't give us
Even
this
if
like
you
it takes two to tango and the guy will help out. Yeah, not usually.
And I've never ever in all of my many years on earth ever known a single mom that said, you know what, the father of this child pays way more than I need to support this
Oh yeah,
child.
we're so
Not
comfortable.
once.
Yeah, we're so comfortable. Got the child a swimming pool, sent it to
Right.
summer camp. Yeah.
Right. It's always the mother saying, well, I worked 3 jobs when they were in diapers, or, something like that. It's like always like if they are financially stable, it's not because the man is paying
Hmm.
more than his share.
Hmm.
That I've never, not once heard a single mother say, oh, I wish I could give some of this money back. He gives me so
Yeah.
much every month. Like literally never heard that. Not once.
Yeah. And again, any guys out there who are like, rah, 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 not all men. Yeah, I'm sure there are some good ones, but you are definitely in the minority.
Right.
The vast majority of guys are ready to duck out, not provide support, or you take them to court. And I mean, we're not even necessarily like blaming individual men. The system is set up to not
Right.
hold men accountable, but to only hold women accountable. Because frankly, it's easier to hold women accountable because the thing's like attached to you, right? There's no question of who the mother is. It's like, well, it came out of her. We know who the mother, right? There's never a maternity test unless you're adopted. I mean, there's never a maternity test in the hospital after you've delivered. It's pretty clear. So it is easier to just say, okay, well, we know who should be responsible here. And all of the systems from paternity testing, the courts, how do you enforce child support and all this is definitely set up that it is easier for men to shirk their responsibilities.
And I remember personally, like, as a kid, obviously my parents like tried not to let me know about this stuff, but some of the stuff I found out, later in life. But like
Mm-hmm.
my mom, so my parents separated when I was like not even a year old. So yeah, there was these like constant battles of who's going to pay for what and stuff. And again, like they were very good about like not letting me hear this stuff, but still there's only
Mm-hmm.
so much you can hide.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I remember talking to my mom about it like later in life, and it was just like I didn't realize like how many times she had to go to court, like if his financial status changed, if he got a promotion, if he was making a lot more money or whatever. It
Mm-hmm.
was like she had to go to court like a lot
Mm-hmm.
just to get,
Yeah.
financial aid for a child that like, my dad agreed to support.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and it wasn't, it wasn't all on him. It was also just the system. It was,
Yeah.
a huge pain in the ass. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to have to spend the entire day like sitting and waiting for your court case. Like, I mean, that's a whole day you have to take off work or whatever, like, and find somebody to take care of the kid that you're arguing about. Like,
Yeah.
it's a whole big thing. And like, I can't even imagine, like, I would have been so frustrated. I would have been like, yeah, just forget it. I got this. Like,
Yeah.
just giving up at some point. But yeah, like, I just, like, just, I, kudos to all the single moms out there, like, fighting through the system, trying to get help. Cause just, wow. Just what a pain in the ass is the only word I can think of.
Yeah. And oh, so I was just thinking how we're touching on the financial responsibility is usually not equal between the men and women.
Oh, no.
And so I know the word I want to use was risk. The financial risk of becoming pregnant is not equal to man and woman, but the physical risk is never equal, because even if you have the baby to term, you have access to health care, there is a risk of disease, maybe disorder is a better term, but debilitation and death in delivering a
Mhm.
baby. The maternal death rates in America for the developed world, they're like horrible. Like, we might as well be the third world. And I
Right.
can guarantee you, no father has ever died during childbirth.
Right.
But mothers die in or as a result of childbirth. So why should a woman have to take this extremely unequal risk to her own life? Because people always want to talk about, like, well, it takes two, like the man should have rights, the father should have rights. But he took no risk. Like, in
Right.
impregnating that woman, he doesn't take on any of the physical risk, the risk of death. He takes on much less financial risk. He takes on probably no risk to his career. So I'm sorry, like, the risks and the rights are not at all equal. The risks and dangers and detriments are just so, so much greater to the mother than the father.
And I think, I believe we've had a couple of conversations about, like, even though, neither of us had children, there's still that, like, when you go for, like, a job interview, or, you're looking into work and stuff, like, there's still this, like, I don't know, I feel like I need to mention that in the
Hmm.
interview. Like, I'm not going to be pregnant. I'm not going to have children, because there's that automatic thought in their head, and you
Yeah.
kind of know it's there. Like, is she going to need, 6 weeks off?
A lot of time off. Yeah.
Yeah. Is she going to need to leave and go get her kids? But I guarantee you, no man
No.
has ever had that thought in an interview, like,
Yeah.
before you even start the job. Like, but I know that I've had that thought every single time I've sat down and, had an in-person interview for every job.
Well, it used to be a legal interview question until, oh, I don't know when, I would guess the 70s, maybe even the 80s. It would have been legal to ask a woman, is she married? What is her method of birth control? Because the thought was, well, you don't want to hire a married woman who's not on reliable birth control. Yeah, because she's going to get pregnant and leave the company, or need a lot of maternity leave, or be expensive, or whatever. Yeah, they used to ask women that point blank in interviews in the 70s. I've read women reporting that happening to them.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, but you would never have asked a married man in the 60s and 70s, what's your method
Yeah,
of birth control with your wife? Because, yeah, who cares?
because he's not going to be
Yeah,
taking time off for dentist
yeah,
appointments or whatever. Like, and he's
yeah,
not going to need
for
6 weeks
maternity.
off to deliver a child.
Yeah. And we still don't, again, it's like we're not even the developed world. We might as well be the third world. We don't even have mandated maternity leave in this country. Like, so yeah, why should any woman take on the risks of an unwanted pregnancy to herself, to her life, to her health, to her career, when there is zero support for that, when we have terrible maternal health care, high risk of maternal death, and no maternity leave? Like, why would, like, if the conservatives were like, let's create a culture that like encourages motherhood and babies and families and like let's get people to breed, because they talk about that from time to time. I don't know, have you ever heard the conservatives talk about how
Yes.
so in future generations we're going to have a labor shortage because like millennials aren't having kids? Well, if you want to encourage people to breed, you need to make it work for people. You
Right.
need to have better health care. You need to have maternity leave. You're not going to like ask people to do something and then make it like impossible for them to do it. That's just so stupid. It's like, let me tell you, if this is what you want to accomplish, you need a better strategy. Like, let me
Right.
help you, conservatives. Let me tell you a strategy like to get people to breed. Uh,
And if you were on the fence and like, I don't know if I want to have kids, let me think about it. And you start crunching the numbers, just daycare alone being
yeah.
more than most people make in a month is like, well, I literally cannot afford it. Like
Yeah.
you hear about mothers all the time saying, well, once I had Timmy or whatever, like I had to stop working because it just wasn't financially feasible for me to work and pay daycare. And it's like, hello, like
Yeah.
that would deter me if I was on the fence for
Yeah.
sure.
The
Like,
cost, definitely. So the cost of not having maternity leave, basically going on leave yourself, then the cost of all the healthcare, because our healthcare costs are so ridiculous, like to get you through the pregnancy. Then let's say you have a safe, healthy delivery, the cost of all the healthcare for the child, the cost of the daycare. Okay. Oh, public school, hooray, finally, it has some place to go during the day for like 12 years, right? Okay, but now it's time to send it to college. That's super expensive. Um, yeah. So
yeah.
all
And
those
when
different
most
costs are
people,
a big detriment to a lot of people. For people who, like you said, normally maybe even would have had a baby or a second baby, they can't afford it.
yeah, it's too ridiculous, like too ridiculously expensive. I know when my brother, when his wife was pregnant, I mean, that was like the first thing, like, what are we gonna do? Is she gonna have to quit her job? Because
Mhm.
like daycare is insane.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being like, it worked out for them because there was a mother-in-law that was like,
Mm,
getting ready to retire. But had that not been the case, they would have been, an entire income short
yeah.
because yeah, it was looking like she was going to have to just stop working.
Excuse
And
me.
that's just nuts. Like, of course nobody wants to have kids.
Yeah.
Like,
So I want to go back to like the idea of the different conservative arguments or religious arguments people are putting forth. So this is only related to the side of the issue of abortion, but birth control, like conservatives are really against, employer health plans providing birth control, or like Planned Parenthood making birth control easy to access, for example.
mhm.
And they seem to, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I have a frog. They seem to be operating under the perception that birth control is for single people having this kind of, oh, no, bad, extramarital sex. Um, Married people, like I can't imagine any conservative counseling a married couple to stop having sex. Everybody knows that's not healthy for your marriage. I certainly can't see conservatives saying like, "Oh no, you don't have to have sex with your husband. Just never have sex again." Married people have sex, and even conservative people are okay with that. So married people who cannot afford to have any or have more children, why do they not have the right to birth control? That mystifies me. This whole argument of why employers shouldn't provide birth control seems to assume either everyone's unmarried or assume everyone's Catholic. Because I also don't understand, like, up until recently, that was only a Catholic argument. Protestants traditionally have never been against birth control. That comes out of the Catholic Church. So that's kind of a new American phenomenon for Protestants to be anti-birth control. And I just don't think that argument holds up at all. Because you
Yeah.
can't, unless you're, I don't know, Catholic. I was gonna say Catholic or Mormon, but I think even the Mormons allow for some birth control.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I
I don't
thought it
know.
was just Catholic. That was my
Yeah.
understanding, was mainly Catholic.
Yeah,
But
I think
yeah,
even the Mormons allow for birth control, if I'm remembering correctly. So all these non-Catholic conservatives in Congress and or taking, the Hobby Lobby case where they wouldn't allow birth control on the healthcare plans that they offered their employees because the owners of Hobby Lobby didn't agree with it. But those people were Protestant, I'm pretty sure. Like that's just somebody who hasn't studied religion, that doesn't make sense to me. It's like you don't even know your own religious teachings and your own religious history of like that is Catholic. You're just like have decided out of the blue that married people just shouldn't use birth control. That's insane.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's like now you're saying, okay, so we're gonna strip abortion rights. So you don't, if you do get pregnant, you don't have any choice in the matter.
Mhm.
You're just gonna have to carry that baby to term. And so it's like, okay, well, I could at least be careful,
Right, to
and take
prevent.
birth control, but you're
Yeah.
taking away that too. And
Yeah.
it's just like, I don't know, that shit just really pisses me off. It's like, it's one thing to say like you think that, these women need to keep their legs together or whatever bullshit you want to
But
say.
like I said, if
But
they're
it's like,
married, you would say, no, 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 you need to have sex with your husband. It's important.
right,
No conservative is going to counsel a married woman to abstain from sex with her
right.
legal husband. They're not going to do that.
You don't get
They
to
don't
have
believe
it
that.
both ways.
Yeah.
Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, you cannot tell women that, like, no, they don't have a choice. And also, you can't have birth control. Like,
Right.
no, no, that is ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
it is nobody's damn business who a woman sleeps with, how many times she sleeps with them, whether or not she wants to get it is nobody's fucking business. Like,
Yeah.
it just, the whole like birth control thing, it crosses a line beyond the abortion. It's like, think what you want about, like, abortion is murder or whatever. If you believe that, whatever, I don't care. But now you're going into like this whole other level, like with the birth control. And it's
Right.
just like, I think it happened with like maybe one of the Bushes. I don't remember. But there was I had like really good health insurance through my job at the time. And I remember I was actually on birth control for endometriosis, like, try to
Mhm.
keep that stuff under control. And there was a period of like at least a year where like I would have to call the pharmacy a few days ahead every damn month to see if they allowed it, to see
Oh
if
my
my
gosh.
insurance covered it. I had to switch brands a couple of times. It was so ridiculous. And it's like, it just like, if I had been just taking it, just because I wanted to be promiscuous or whatever, that's one thing. Still, none of anybody's damn business. But seriously, we're talking about like my doctor's giving me this stuff to keep me healthy.
Right.
And y'all are giving me shit at the pharmacy, at on the phone with the insurance company, like every step of the way. It was a pain. And I just like, come on. What do you expect women to do? Like, come on. Like, stop fighting against us every step of the way. Like, ugh. Yeah,
So
that
this
shit makes
kind
my
of
blood boil.
this kind of takes us back to we started with me saying let's not discuss the constitutionality, but as I understand it, you've kind of brought us to the legal issue, which is the right to privacy. As I understand it, Roe v. Wade was argued on the right to privacy, that abortion is like the prescribing of birth control is a medical decision. And it is
Right.
a decision that a woman makes in conjunction with her doctor. And by definition, cannot do on your own. You cannot prescribe yourself birth control. It's still not over the counter here, although it is in some places, like some places outside of America. But it's a prescription. Abortion is a procedure. Therefore, by definition, it's made as a part of a medical consultation, and everyone has the right to privacy. And this is what I think is interesting. As far as I understand, past arguments in the 70s, they were really interested in preserving the right to privacy of the doctor. That initially pro abortion arguments, the women were like inconsequential. The argument was the government should not interfere in the doctor's right to practice medicine and in doctor confidentiality. And so the question in the 70s, maybe the 60s, now I sound like just so dumb and uneducated, but the question on the table used to be, is the doctor like at fault? Like I said, it's almost as if the one we're not even, they were irrelevant. Is the doctor at fault for performing the abortion? And so people wanted to protect abortion rights to protect doctors from going to prison for performing abortions, because women had the right to privacy, doctors had the right to, like doctor-patient confidentiality, to privacy, in the sense of they should be left alone to practice medicine. So a big part of the argument didn't even have to do with women. It had to do with like doctors should just be allowed to practice medicine and not be interfered with.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I think it's super interesting. Yeah, but so I guess this is why I'm like not confident Roe v. Wade will stand, is because I think the only constitutional argument is that right to privacy argument. Because I don't see where else. Obviously, we don't consider healthcare in America a constitutional right because we don't, you know what I'm saying? Because we have privatized healthcare.
Right.
And we don't consider it a human right. And so you can't really make healthcare specific arguments based on constitutional law. So that's why they've gone for like right to privacy. And I don't know. I don't know if it's going to hold up. Oh, so I guess I should have told you. So they heard the statements, the Supreme Court heard the statements on this Mississippi ban about 10 days ago. I think they heard them like December 1st through 3rd, and people file briefs and testify. And so they take in all the evidence, but they're not actually supposed to give a verdict for like 6 months, like until the summer. So we don't know what's going to happen.
And I think you and I talked about briefly, like, what is going to happen in the meantime? Does that mean that, like,
I think that means the law has to stand. Now, in some cases, the Department of Justice, like the federal government, can file a motion for the law to be like held. I don't know the word I want. Like purgatory. That's not the word I want because it's religious, but the idea of something just like sort of held in suspension and not applied until the hearing. Like, I think the norm is the law applies until overturned, but sometimes the Department of Justice can file a brief and says, no, we want the law not upheld until there's a hearing. So I don't know what's happened with that. I don't know if it's being implemented in Mississippi or not. Now, I did learn, remember how we were saying Roe v. Wade, the sort of line in the sand is 24 weeks. Well, I read that there actually are multiple abortion laws in multiple states in America that have been pushing that 24 weeks up, and there are 21-week bans and there are 16-week bans, but nobody took them to court over it. People have just kind of been getting by, and clinics that perform abortions have just been, just slowly adjusting to this incremental creep. And so the Mississippi law, they actually, the existing law was 16 weeks. They only actually changed it by a week. So the Mississippi, and there's only one, the last Mississippi abortion clinic was performing 16-week abortions. And now they want to move it to 15. And now they finally took them to court over it. But yeah, we haven't been operating under a 24-week system in most places in America in a long time.
That's,
I left a pause there for you to be shocked, and there was like a
I just
long pause.
I don't even have any words. Like, I just don't, it's just so frustrating. It's just so frustrating to just know that like the government controls your actual body and
Yeah.
can have such a say so. And it's not like this is a little thing. I mean,
No.
children, having a child changes your life, your entire life. It's just,
Yeah.
it's so disturbing. Like, there's just not any words. Like, I don't know. I don't know of anything that pisses me off more than
Than
the
the
abortion.
abortion issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it
And the
is
birth
kind of the
control.
fundamental, it is kind of the fundamental control. Your
It
uterus
is.
is public property. Yeah. It's crazy. And then we didn't even touch on rape, because I think probably we didn't, because it kind of goes without saying that no, conservatives, it's not as simple as women being chaste, because women and girls are raped. We
Right.
don't often make the choice whether we are going to become pregnant, because any brute at any time could hold us down and impregnate us against our wills. So there's that. I feel like so down now. Well, there's that. So that should go without saying. I remember when they passed the, either Texas or Arkansas was the first one to pass an abortion law that did not make allowances for incest. And I was so shocked. There had not been such a thing before. Most people, even if they believe that there should be restrictions on abortion. Oh, so by the way, we should say that most people are not one or the other. If you look at polling data, most people are not like, yes, 100% life, pro-life at all costs. Every single person who's ever accidentally touched a sperm has to stay pregnant. Or on the other end, yeah, abortion right up until the moment of birth for any reason performed by any type of doctor. Like, most people are not one or the other. If you look at polling data, most people lean one way or the other. They say, I'm pro-life, but there should be exceptions, or I'm pro-choice, but there can be some reasonable limits. Most people are
Hmm.
like that. So there had never been these quote pro-life laws that did not make incest exceptions. And I remember being so shocked, because I remember thinking, animals commit incest. Animals, will have interbreeding and carry to term and birth, you know. And like, to me, when we force girls to carry the product of incest, we become animals. We say, yeah, that's okay. We now accept incest is now sort of become a part of our culture, that we're going to have these children of incest born. I just think, I'm sorry, that's like animals to me. It's
Yeah.
like barbaric.
And you got to think about like what kind of situation are you looking at? Most of the time, if it's incest, that girl was not a willing participant. You know what I mean?
Oh, I want
Like,
to say always. I can't think of any incest. I mean, like occasionally you see like weird stuff in like there's this Korean
right,
movie. There's a Korean movie I like where there's like a brother sister. They're like high schoolers, and there's weird. Like, dude, that doesn't happen. That's just some weird sick male fantasy. No,
right.
incest is girls, and we do mean girls. We mean females under the age of 18. Sometimes as young as, really young, 9, 10, 11 can become pregnant. Girls are raped by their fathers, their stepfathers, their uncles, their older brothers. And no, I'm sorry, you should not make a girl raped at the hands of someone who was supposed to love and protect her, force her through the trauma of carrying the product of that rape for 9 months, the trauma of going through labor and delivery as a child when she's not physically, emotionally, intellectually prepared for that trauma. I think that's cruel and unusual punishment. Not even punishment. She didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
It's just cruel and unusual. It's just barbarism. Again, I'm going back to, it's just animal behavior. It's barbaric behavior for there not to be an allowance for incest. I can't believe
Yeah.
that.
In my state, we have a big problem with child brides, and people come into this area because, they want to be allowed to marry their child brides. And, there's just a lot of incest situations,
Ugh.
and just I've never personally seen that much of it, thank goodness. But like, I don't know, some of that's, it's like I think about what kind of resentment would be going on there, because you've got, a young girl who's forced to give birth, like you said, before her body's even ready, before she can comprehend it mentally. Like, how is she supposed to care for that child and love and protect that child under like under those circumstances? Like,
Mhm.
how? That's so mean. You're telling her, be a good mother, like, how like, because I just can't imagine what the resentment is like. And then for the child as well, like, when the child is old enough to understand what happened and how they were brought into this
Oh,
world,
yeah, I can't
what
imagine.
kind of mental anguish is that
Mhm.
child going to go through if they find out who the father is, and what how young their mother was, or
Mhm.
just if they ever find out what the circumstances are, like, how do you deal with that? That's
Mhm.
so much resentment, so much mental anguish. Like, that is like the meanest fucking thing you can do. Make that girl have that baby. Like, why?
Mhm.
That, like, it screws up everybody involved, everybody. And the man who caused the situation is, I'm sure he has feelings too. Not that I give a shit what he thinks, but like, but it's just like everybody involved, and like, the other family members that know what happened. That's a whole lot of just mental shittiness that everybody's got to deal with. And it's like, and now you give them no options, no options. They literally cannot even choose to say, hey, I don't want to bring this child into the world. Like,
Mhm.
what kind of government does that? That's just, it's like, it's so cruel. It's
It's
so cruel.
antisocial because you're describing the ways that it touches that it's something animals do. It is not something that we are socially equipped to accept. And no, I don't think it is something that we should accept. Um, Incest. I'm not saying that we should have a stigma against children of incest because it wasn't their fault, but I'm saying incest itself as a social phenomenon, how it destroys girls and women, it destroys family, it is harmful to the child, him or herself. It's anti-social, it's anti-human, it's animal behavior. Um, uh, yes. Oh, we need to like wrap it up. We're in a really intense part of our conversation though. So how are we gonna I don't know. But I mean maybe it's to be expected with an abortion conversation that there is not gonna be a good stopping point.
No,
Um
I mean,
yeah, so lots and lots of secular reasons to support abortion rights, and I don't see any secular argument to stop abortion. And because we live in a government that has separation of church and state.
do we?
Oh, well, you know what I'm saying? Like we have it
Technically.
written in, yeah, I mean, we have it written into our law. We have it written into our style of democracy. You know, we don't live on Iran.
That's true. But
Yeah,
sometimes
I
especially in
know.
the South, it just feels like, where is that
Yeah,
separation?
well, that's what we
Because
have to fight for. Yeah, we have to continue to make secular arguments and point out that people are making religious arguments now in a variety of fronts. It might be a formal, organized religion that we all recognize, like Catholicism being against birth control. Or it can just be any appeal to the metaphysical that doesn't have scientific backing. Like we've touched on a couple of times, putting gender identity rights over and above sex-based rights. Well, that's a metaphysical claim. There is no material reality to gender identity. So I think, especially here in the South, like you're saying, we need to point out places where that separation of church and state is threatened by people making religious or quasi-religious arguments for things.
And it's a slippery slope. It is a very slippery slope once you start like letting the church into the law.
Yeah, people who want to like make their, use their religion to, it's like, yeah, it's all fun and games when it's your religion, huh? But
Right, exactly. You may not believe what the people at the church next to you believe.
yeah,
Like it's slippery. You don't want to do that, but here we are.
so
Well, that was fun
yeah.
as
Well,
usual.
that was something. I guess we
think
need to
we're gonna
wrap it
have
up.
to start another YouTube channel that's like we just talk about happy, I don't know, unicorns and glitter or something
I don't know
to
what
just
kind
like
of
balance
happy,
it.
I don't know though, because like what kind of happy, okay, because let's look at the other Southern news, like Kentucky was destroyed by tornadoes. And
No.
like what kind of happy news are we gonna point to these days? And maybe I'm just a dark person and I can't think of anything happy. Did anything
No.
good happen in
It's
the South recently? There's like a sigh.
balls. Crickets.
Yeah. I mean, we're excited about the things everyone's excited about. The holidays coming up. That's fun. And
Yeah, maybe we
winter,
should
do you
just
like
have a
winter?
I don't actually.
Okay, no.
I just don't like the cold because it
Yeah.
never snows here. So it's
It's
like, what's
just
the
cold with
point?
no
It's
snow.
like,
Yeah.
if it's not pretty on top of the cold, like just at least give me some hot weather.
Yeah. Well, let's say goodbye to our
All
faithful
right.
listeners. And you and I can just continue to chat after. Okay, we're ready to say our goodbyes.
We're ready.
Okay. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.